Hi, I'm Oz, and in this guide, I will be going over everything to do with the action bar in Honkai Star Rail. The action bar at first glance looks intuitive and easy to grasp. However, it is a complex system with a lot of mechanics that the game doesn't entirely explain. This can get confusing for players trying to understand situations when an enemy's toughness bar breaks, and they sometimes do get pushed back, but other times they don't. This guide will be discussing the speed stat and what it does, how speed and action forward buffs work, and finally, what breaking the toughness part does. The speed stat should be straightforward, right? The more speed a character has, the sooner he goes. In short, yes, but it's more nuanced than that. Honkai Star Rail uses what I will call a step system. In Honkai's step system, imagine there is a field and from one end to the other is about 10,000 units of length. Once a character reaches the end of the field, they can take their turn. A single step is equal to the speed stat of any character. We can find the total number of steps a character needs to take by dividing the total length of the field by the speed stat of that character. If Herta has a speed of 100, she needs to take 100 steps to reach the end of the field. If Dong Heng has a speed of 125, he only needs to take 80 steps to reach the end and begin his turn. Before we continue, let's enable action values to be displayed on the action bar. Go to the menu and click on Settings. On the last tab, enable whether to display the character's action values during a battle. This shows the remaining number of steps an enemy or ally needs to take to begin their turn. It will come in handy for the rest of the guide, so I highly recommend this. Here's a little post commentary I forgot to mention. Action values are literally steps, and without that knowledge, the rest of the guide makes no sense. So let's continue on. Let's get into a battle to examine the step system in action. When we begin a fight, before we see the action bar, the game already begins counting each individual character's steps. It's sort of like a clock, and on every tick, all characters take a step. The game jumps to the fastest character in the action order. They are at step 0, meaning they get to take their action first. Our Dong Heng has 125 speed, just like in the example, so he took 80 steps and is now taking his action. That means 80 steps have elapsed, and all characters are 80 steps from the start of the field. Let's take a look at Herta's speed stat. It's 100 just like in the example before, so she needs to take 100 steps to take her action. As expected, Herta's action value in the action bar is displaying around 20 because 80 steps have elapsed. Keep in mind, these are all approximate estimates and action values on the action bar are all rounded to the nearest whole number. So sometimes the displayed value will be one above or below what has been calculated. Once a character takes their action, they immediately restart from the beginning of the track, and the game recalculates the total number of steps they take based on their current speed. Since Dong Heng's speed didn't change, he needs to take another 80 steps before he can begin his next action. All participants continue to take steps until the next character reaches step 0. Dong Heng and Herta take their next actions when 160 steps and 200 steps have elapsed accordingly. This pattern continues until the battle is over, assuming no speed buffs or debuffs that would affect speed or step count occur, and no weakness breaking occurs. Now that we know the basics of how the step system works, the remainder of the guide will be a bit faster to explain. First, I should explain how speed buffs work, and how it affects the step system. So back to the blackboard. Increasing speed increases the size of steps a character takes, which means the character takes less steps to reach the finish line. Dong Heng with 125 speed originally needed 80 steps to reach the finish line. If he receives a buff that increases his speed to 160, he will only need about 63 steps to reach the end and begin his turn. That means he cut the steps he needed to take by about 17. This is assuming Dong Heng receives the buff at the start of the field though. What if he receives the buff while he's halfway across the field? To find the total number of steps he needs, we divide the remaining units of length he needs to cross, that being 5,000, by Dong Heng's new speed 160. That is roughly 31 steps. If we add in the total number of steps Dong Heng took to reach halfway across the field at his regular speed, to the number of steps he took to reach the end of the field from the halfway point, it totals to 71 steps. So he only cut the total number of steps by 9, compared to 17 last time. Keep this in mind when using speed buffs such as Asta's ult. Speed debuffs work identically to speed buffs, just in the other direction. Action forward buffs are more potent than speed buffs. percentage-based action forward buffs don't care where you are on the field when the buff is activated. It is solely based on the total number of steps a character needs to take from the start of the field to the end. Let's use Dang Heng again as an example. So he needs to take 80 steps to reach the end. If he receives a 20% action forward buff, he instantly jumps 16 steps from anywhere he is on the field. If he is within 16 steps or less from the end, he immediately reaches step 0 and begins his turn, unless another character at the same time reaches the end by an action forward buff but required less steps to reach the end or is already at step 0 before Dang Heng received the buff. Just like before, action forward debuffs work like action forward buffs, but in the opposite direction. Let's talk about the final section and the one I admit I'm most shaky on, elemental breaks. We won't be going over all the unique effects elemental toughness breaking has, just how they affect action value, aka steps. In this video, we will split elements in two unofficial categories, action delaying elements and non-action delaying elements. For non-action delaying elements, the ones that aren't ice, quantum, or imaginary, they all work identical to each other. When breaking an enemy's toughness bar with one of these elements, they are sent back by a fixed step value of 25% of the total number of steps they need to reach the end of the field. Elite mobs with speeds of about 120 speed and corresponding step totals to about 83 steps will be sent back by about 21 steps. Just like action forward debuffs, it does not matter how close or far they are from their action. Stacking break effects on relics does not affect the fixed percentage either. Moving on to action delaying elements, let's first take a look at ice. Like the non-action delaying elements, breaking an enemy's toughness bar with ice sends an enemy back 25% of their total step, but it also freezes the enemy. The enemy will remain frozen until their turn begins, and then they thaw, sending them back by a further 50% of their step total. This amounts to a whopping 75% send back based on the enemy's step total. Again, break effect percentage does not affect either the freezing or thawing fixed percentages. Now on to quantum. Quantum uses an interesting equation when sending back opponents. It is 25% plus 30% times 1 plus break effect percentage. All that multiplied by the step total of the enemy. To explain this equation as simply as possible, let's assume our quantum character's break effect percentage is 0. We get 25% plus 30% times 1 plus 0, or 55% of the enemy's step total. Also, as you can see, break effect percentage in this case does affect the total number of steps the enemy is sent back. Imaginary works on nearly the identical equation as quantum, or that's what I would assume since I don't own an imaginary character. I've done a fair bit of research looking through streamers' Twitch VODs, but I am unable to verify this equation I am going to show on the screen. This is what my guess on what imaginary does based on what I've gathered from Reddit and Discord. However, I can't verify it myself, so if someone who has Welt can explain what imaginary does when breaking an enemy, please comment. I would really appreciate it. And that's all for this guide. I'm Ozzy, and if you have any questions or recommendations on guides you would like to see be made, please comment down below. Also, I couldn't have done this video without Dang It Don's Reddit post and Lily Akina's video. Both links are in the description down below. It's been real. See ya.